Welcome, everyone. This is Jim Grace. I'm giving a talk today. Like the last talk, it has two titles. The short one is Approvals, etc. And the longer title is Approvals, Approval Acceptances, Approval Workflows and Levels, and how they interact with attribute option combos and category option group sets. Approvals is one of these features that has tendrils in various places. And this is my offer. If you are watching this today from Oslo, and you watch the whole presentation and you don't learn a single new thing about how approvals technically work in DHIS2, then I will buy you lunch tomorrow. And for those who are maybe watching from a distance or seeing the recording, I will extend the offer. If you watch this in 2018 at any time, and you don't learn a single technical new thing about how approvals work in DHIS2, with the possible exception of Lars, because I think he approved each of these features as we went along. But if you're anyone else, and you don't learn a single new thing about approvals, and you watch this video during 2018, and you didn't hear about it from someone else who watched the video or from documentation that was written subsequently, next time you and I are in the same city and we're buying lunches for ourselves, I will buy your lunch. So that is my offer. First of all, something you probably know, but we'll go over the basics. There's a hierarchy to data approval, so they can be used, as in this instance, in an organization unit hierarchy. We'll talk later about how you can have the hierarchy more flexible than just following the organization unit. But the point is that if we have these nodes A, B, C, and D in our organization unit hierarchy, let's say that data is already approved at all of B's children. So if the data is already approved at C and D, then it is ready to be approved at B, and someone can hit the approve button for org unit B. Now, if you look at org unit A, it is not yet approved for all of A's children, because it's not yet approved for B in particular. So it's not ready to approve at A. So the idea is, where approvals are defined, you have to approve it at all the lower level nodes before you can approve it at the next higher node. There is a system option that you can set as to whether you have acceptances for every approval. So the simple case is on the left, where you approve it at one node, and then immediately you can approve it at the next higher level node. But if you want, through a system setting, you can set that acceptances are required in your system. What that means is, you approve it at a lower node, and then a user from a higher level has to accept it at that node before you can then approve it at the higher node. What does that do? Why is this there? This is a feature that was requested for approvals because they wanted some review time at the next higher node. You want to be able to know when you accept it at the higher node, that means the data is locked and it cannot be unapproved by the lower level user. We try to make things in DHIS2, like in all well-designed software, so that as much as possible, if you do something by accident, you can undo it. And so if I approve some data and then realize I hit the wrong button, I can unapprove that data. And in the left-hand case, where you just have one step per approval, I can unapprove that data I just approved until the node above me approves, in which case then it's locked for me. Now, that puts someone at the next higher node in a bit of an awkward position, because if they have something coming in from 10 different facilities or 10 different districts, and they want to look at all that data, until they hit approve, it is not locked. It is not. It can still be modified by the people at a lower level. So the two-step approve and then accept allows the user at the next higher level to say, okay, I've accepted your approval and now it's locked. If you subsequently find you approved it in error, you have to come to me and ask me to unaccept it. Then you can unapprove it and make your changes. But unless that happens, I know that everything is accepted, is locked from being changed at the lower level. So now I can review all the data and know that it won't be changing. By the time I review the 10th or 11th facility, the first facility won't have unapproved it and changed it and reapproved it behind my back without knowing what's going on. So that's why we have either straight approve on up through, or you can have approve and accept at each level. Data approval levels. So data is approved at organization unit levels, but it doesn't have to be approved at every organization unit level. You can say that, in this example, the first time I approve data is at the sub-district level, at org unit level 4. And that approves for all the facilities in the sub-district. And then maybe the next time in my implementation I want to approve data is at the province level. So the province can't approve until all the sub-districts in that province have approved. But you can define as many or as few organization unit levels as you want as data approval levels. So notice the difference in the numbering. We talk about org unit level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but then we talk about approval level 1 and 2. So in the future slides, try to keep that distinction clear in your minds. Approvals are done by what is called a data approval workflow. So a workflow will define which levels you want to approve the data at. So the levels are defined first, the approval levels in one part of the metadata configuration. And then you define workflows. So in this case, you might define a workflow for HIV to approve data. And that means it's approving the data in the data sets HIV Care Monthly and HIV periodic monthly summary. Each workflow has a period type and specifies the approval levels at which that workflow applies. Then when you configure your data sets, you can optionally associate a data set with an approval workflow. If you don't associate a data set with an approval workflow, that means that data is not subject to approvals. It's just entered as if you weren't using approvals. But if you specify the workflow with the data set, then it goes to that. So you can see maybe the admin workflow we want to approve only quarterly. So for anyone who might know something about approvals, can you tell me why we have two different workflows that both have approval levels 1 and 3, and they both have workflow period type of monthly? Why didn't we just throw all three of those data sets into the same workflow? Why would that be? Any guesses? Different people may be entering it. And even though the workflows have the same period type, the same approval levels, they go through a different approval process. So one set of users might be responsible for the stock approvals, and a different set of users might be responsible for the HIV data approvals. And so you may have the HIV data approved, but the stock data is not yet approved. So every time you approve something at a level, you approve all the data sets for that workflow. Audience question. I'm going to be doing some of these in this presentation. Hopefully that keeps people awake. I know it's easier right after lunch if I'm doing the talking. It's easier to stay awake myself. So in the previous slide, we saw that a workflow has a period type. We all know that data sets also have period types. So the question is, what is the relationship between the workflow period type and the data set period type? Must they be the same? As we were designing this feature, this was an open question. We hadn't answered it yet. Can the workflow period type be shorter than the data set period type? Can it be longer than the data set period? What do you think? The same or longer. The workflow period type could be the same, or it could be longer. Any other guesses? That's a good guess. We almost implemented it that way. So the answer is, it doesn't matter. And as I was implementing it, I first thought exactly the same thing. The workflow could be for a longer period. So for example, if you have a workflow that's quarterly, that should be able to approve all 3 months in that quarter. And then I was faced with the decision, do I try to write code that enforces this relationship? And what happens if you're just setting this up for the first time and you set up the workflow, and then you go back and you edit the data set and choose a different period type? And now they no longer follow this rule that we So I thought about it for a while and finally decided that the easiest thing was to say it didn't matter. If you specify a yearly data set, like the one at the bottom of this slide, for all of 2018, it will get approved when you approve the 4th quarter of the year. So in fact, the rule down at the bottom is any data set period that ends during the approved period gets approved. So if you wanted to maybe you have some monthly data, and maybe you have some annual data. If you wanted to, you could set up a single workflow to approve it quarterly. The 1st quarter of the year, you just approve the first 3 months. The 2nd quarter, the second 3 months. 3rd quarter, the 3rd set of 3 months. The 4th quarter, you're approving both the last 3 months and also the annual data with the same approval process, if you want to. Of course, if you don't want to do that, if you want to set up a separate workflow for the annual data, you're free to do that as well. But I set this up in a flexible way mostly so I didn't have to write code to worry about what happens when it doesn't match the rules that we just defined.
So that means you can skip an approval on a data set for a period.
Yeah, data doesn't have to be approved.
Yeah. It just has to follow the workflow once.
Right. Right. So currently we're just doing approval for aggregate data. And it used to be that we would do approval per data set. And then what we found out with implementations like PEPFAR, they ended up with about 12 different data sets that were all part of their basic workflow for monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, MER. And so to save approvals and to save space in the database for all this, we allow data sets to be grouped. You can think of a workflow, it kind of serves the function as of a data set group. We thought at one point, do we make a thing called data set group? A data set group set, the way we have for other kinds of objects in DHS too. But we eventually decided on workflow because it's not only groups data sets, but it says which approval levels and which workflow period types there are. So we thought also about extending this model to event approvals. And in fact, it's been in the release now for a few releases, and it's suggested we clean it up until we get it fully implemented. If you go into program, you'll find that you can assign workflow to it in the user interface today, which actually doesn't do anything yet because we haven't fully implemented approvals for programs. But the idea is that it would restrict the event date of an event to say if it's within the period specified by the approval, then it would be approved. but it's not there yet. And the reason one of the benefits of also of moving to workflow instead of data set is now you could associate, in theory, a program with a workflow. It could be the same workflow that also approves aggregate data, or it could be a different workflow. That's your choice in the implementation. Okay, time for another audience question. What does data approval actually do? We've been talking as if we assume or we kind of know what it does, but what difference does it make in the system that I approve a period of some data versus I haven't approved some data? What does the system do differently after an approval? Any guesses?
You could have only approved data in the reports or unapproved.
Good. You could have only approved data in the reports is one answer. What else does approving do? Hint, we've talked about it already. Okay, it locks the data, so new data can't be added or changed. So it locks the data. It determines whether data will appear in the reports. Is there anything else that approval does in the system?
I guess you can keep track of who is actually approving that. So there's a link between.
Oh, that would be a good idea.
If you don't track who is actually approving.
I don't think so.
Accountability for data.
No, I'm not sure. We don't report it in any good way. I can't remember whether it's trapped in the database. That was a trick question. Those are the only two things I know that approvals actually do. They lock data from a period that has been approved, and in reporting, there's an optional function through a system setting where you can hide unapproved data from higher level users. Now, we usually think higher level users are more powerful, they can see more. This is at least one case in the system where sometimes they can see less than the lower level users. Now, if this feature is puzzling to you, you're not alone. It is a rather puzzling feature. Why would we have done such a feature? And the answer, that was just a rhetorical question this time. The answer is, think about how this might work if you had multiple systems. If you didn't have a single DHIS2 instance with all these levels, you might be collecting data at a facility and then what? Physically sending it or uploading it on the internet to a different data collection system. So the idea is, until you physically send it to the higher level, this is data that you're just entering, you're reviewing, you may not have it right yet, you may have some data quality problems, you may want to fix it. It's your private data. Before you physically send it, the person you're sending it to has no way they can see it. Yet in DHIS2, where it's all can be a single system, this hiding it from the higher levels provides the same kinds of features. It said, let me work on my private data until I'm sure the numbers are accurate. Then I will approve it. Then you, at the next level, be it district or state or province or national, then you can see it. Yes.
This statement is kind of confusing.
Oh, it hides unapproved data. Yes. Well, maybe I can fix that slide before I release the slide set. That's good.
Yeah, because it's often linked to publishing data.
That's right. Exactly. So data approval, to make this slide better, it should say it unhides this data from higher level users. So there's another user question in here, so pay attention, another audience question. So for example, if I am user D and I'm responsible for approving level at the facility, approving data at the facility level, before I approve it, the data cannot be, if we're using the data hiding, then that data cannot be seen by users A, B, or C. Once I approve it at the facility level, or approval level 3, then it can be seen by user C, but not yet by user A. because user C has not approved it at the district level. Once user C approves it at the district level, then it can be seen by user A. The audience question is, what about user B? If you have a user who's assigned at the province level, where there is no approval level, when do you think user B can first view the data in the approval process? Any guesses? When it's approved by user A.
Yeah, same time as user A.
User B at the same time as user A. That's one opinion. Any others?
Post user C approval.
Post user C approval. Yeah. Well, it turns out that's not the way it's implemented.
It's irrelevant.
What?
It's irrelevant.
Well, suppose that, so in fact the way it's implemented is user B can see the same as user C, and here's why. You being able to approve data has separate authority. Actually, if you do the two-step approve and then accept from a higher level, there are actually different authorities for that, because you might have one person responsible for focusing downwards on the districts below and making sure all the data comes in and is accepted and locked, and then you may have a different person who's responsible for posting to the higher level what at the provincial level are we comfortable with after it's gone through our data quality. So the point is that user B might be assigned the ability to approve or accept. Should they be able to approve or accept up at the country level? No, because they're a province level user. So in fact, what the approval system does is it looks at each user and it ranks them according to which approval level are they associated with. And so it will associate user B with approval level 2, meaning if user B has the authority to accept, it can accept something from facility up to district. If user B has the authority to approve, it can approve something from district up to country. Yes, Phil.
Can a user only be linked with one approval level, or could A also have approval privileges for level 2?
There is another authority which allows you to approve at lower levels, and that's a different authority. So you could also give that authority to user A if you wanted. There's also, I mean, we did this data hiding thing because in part we were implementing this for PEPFAR, and we were actually replacing a system where the data was physically transferred from each country. Kenya would capture all their own data in this Microsoft Access database, KEPMS, and would physically upload, once the Kenya country team was comfortable with the data, they would upload this data to the corporate people at Washington, D.C. for them to review and follow up with. So, sorry, your question again was?
Yeah, well, you sort of answered it, because it was just whether you could, you can also approve at lower levels.
Yes, yes. Oh, so then once we got all this data hiding in place, then PEPFAR said, but of course we have these global M&E consultants who should be able to see the data even before the partners approve it way down at the facility, because they advise our partners on how to clean their data and all this. So while it's hidden from normal people at the higher levels, we also have another special authority in DHIS2 that allows people to see the lower level data, even if they have no authority to approve the lower level data. So that's in there. So we have all kinds of, all different options of how to handle this in DHIS2.
So that's the C unapproved data.
Yes, C unapproved data. And if you don't do the data hiding system setting, then that authority is meaningless. Because you can also decide as a system setting whether you want to hide unapproved data from the higher levels at all, ever. I hope everyone's learned at least something new about data approval so far, or else I'm going to be buying a lot of lunches. Oh, another audience question. How do you think data approvals apply to data with attribute option combos? We talked about this in an earlier talk, and this is one reason why I put this talk after the talk about attribute option combos. What if you have projects and or partners, or projects and partners, and you have your attribute option combo set up to have the data entered differently? How is it approved? Any guesses?
Have to approve each one.
Ah, that's the right answer. You have to approve for each one. And so for each attribute option combo, data is approved independently. Attribute option combos in DHIS2, they're a lot like having separate virtual systems within the same larger system. So if you have attribute option combos, you can say, for someone in a certain partner or someone working on a certain project, this is the whole system. All you can see is the data for that partner or that project. You can set it up in DHIS2 that way. And someone else working on another project, as far as they can see, all the data in the system is only the data on that project. So it's like they're virtualizing DHIS2. They're each seeing the same data elements, or at least the ones you share with them. And you can share different data elements, of course, with different users. But they may be seeing the same data structures. They may even be seeing the same organization unit hierarchy, but they're seeing different data. It's like they're each seeing their own virtual instance of DHIS2, and only those users with the authority to see all the projects or all the partners can aggregate that data together and view it by partner or project. So it's actually a very powerful feature of DHIS2. It's almost like having virtualized DHIS2 instances within a system. Anyway, that was a bit of a digression, but approval levels, and this is the last big point of this discussion, and it's going to play out over the next 5 different slides. But approval levels can be defined in various ways depending on how you want users to approve data with attribute option combos at different levels. And you'll see what I mean when we go through the slides ahead. You can have, at most, one approval level for each organization unit level. That's what we've seen on earlier slides. An org unit level either has an approval level or it doesn't. However, you can also define, in the way I will show you soon, 2 approval levels for the same organization unit level. And you can even define more than 2 approval levels for the same organization unit level. I will show you why in the next few slides, and how you can do this, and I will show you why you can do this as well. So, in the definition of an approval level, you can say which organization unit level it is for. And then there's this funny thing you can define. You can add a category option group set to an approval level. Now, what in the world does a category option group set have to do with an approval level? You'll see this over the next 3 slides. But if you're just doing one approval level at each organization unit, or no more than one at each organization unit, forget about that category option group set column. So just leave it blank. So that's case 1. That's the easy case. Case 2. If you want to define 2 different approval levels at the same organization unit level, you can do that like this. You can say the data is approved at each facility for each various project partner. And again, you can use sharing to share the category option combo used as an attribute option combo for a partner. You can share that with that partner's users and not with the other partner's users. So you can already say, okay, this partner only gets to approve this partner's data, that partner only gets to approve that partner's data at the facility level. And you can say the same at the district level. And then perhaps you want a different approval level at the district level, and the reason for this will become clear when I show slides. Why would you want that? Well, it turns out it's something that PEPFAR wanted. We'll get into that in a moment. But at the district level, I can define an approval level, maybe I call this district all, approval level 2, where I'm saying after each of the partners has gone through and approved their projects, I want another approval level where somebody who oversees all the partners can say, yes, all this data is good at the district level. So it's where you have maybe each partner has their own organization, but then you have a district review team that brings it all together. And the way you do this, which doesn't make complete sense yet, but will make better sense in the next couple of slides, the way you do this is by assigning a category option group set. So you define 2 different approval levels for the same organization unit level, in this case, the district level of the org unit hierarchy. You define 2 different approval levels, you can call them district all and district partner. To the lower level 1, you assign a category option group set. And, oh, I know another thing I was going to say earlier in response to a question is that this is not the kind of workflow that you'd find in a classic workflow engine, where you define levels, you assign people to each level. All these workflows and all these levels are done just by looking at the user. So if we step back a few slides and look at that mysterious user B, they are assigned to this level based on the fact that they are a user at the province level. And so we use basically an implicit way by looking at where the user is assigned, what they can see, in order to determine the approval level that they have. So if you have this case where you have a project partner, we determine that they are associated with approval level 3 and not approval level 2 because they are assigned at a district level facility and because they do not have permission to look across all partners. So they belong to one or more partners, but they don't have the permission to look across all partners. Whereas the users also assigned to a district organization unit who have no restriction on category option combos, they, if they have the approval authority, they can approve at approval level 2. So we've taken the same org unit level, and we've said there are 2 different approval levels at that organization unit group. Any questions about that? This will make even more sense when we go from 2 to greater than 2. Okay, so if you're ready now for greater than 2, this is the requirement that we got from PEPFAR. They said, okay, in Tanzania or in any of the countries we work in, we have various partners working in Tanzania. And they have to approve all the levels. These are Tanzania country users. They can see all of Tanzania. They need to approve their data up to the country agency who supervises their work in Tanzania. So this again will be another user who is assigned to the Tanzania org unit, who is responsible for all the USAID projects or all the Peace Corps projects or all the Department of Defense, even in the US government, oversees the deployment of for the country military partners. So we want the country agency user to approve it at the same country level. But these are users that are assigned to an agency. And then, a third time, at the same country level, we want an interagency team, which confusingly enough is made up of users from different agencies in the country. We want an interagency team to be able to say, yes, across all the agencies and across all the partners, this data is approved and ready to go up to global. Then we want global users, or headquarters users, as we might have called it, to be able to, again, accept the approval sent up to them from the country and lock the data, and then review it and make sure that it's good enough to report back to U.S. Congress where the funding comes for this whole program. So how do we model 3 approval levels at the same org unit level? That was the question we were faced with. And that's why this very strange design came of specifying a category option group set in the approval level. So the answer is, and this is, PEPFAR now has a somewhat more complicated approval level configuration, but this was the configuration that they had for their first 4 or so years of operation, where you had at the country level, if I am a user who belongs to a partner that's part of the category option group set of implementing partner, if I am a user assigned to Tanzania, assigned to the partner FHI 360, I know that the system looks and sees, okay, you're assigned to something that's a member of the category option group set implementing partner, therefore you can approve at level 4. If I am a user in Tanzania who's assigned to the US government agency USAID, I see that you are assigned to something in the category option group set funding agency, therefore you can approve at level 3. If I am an interagency user assigned to Tanzania, same org unit, but I have no restriction on the category options that I can see, then this must be an interagency account. And if you have the approval authority, you are assigned to approval level 2, still at the same org unit level. So that is maybe one of the stranger functions of DHIS2, but it allowed us to support PEPFAR without adding a lot of extra metadata or configuration to the system, just by adding this 1 column category option group set to the approval level. So I think you now understand this better than just about everyone except for Lars and me and a couple of other people have understood it until now. Any questions about this? This is the last big thing in this presentation. Maybe the last thing at all. Should I go back and say it again? Phil?
Just one thing. So you have to explicitly restrict people at a certain level. So you have to be clear that if you want to control this flow, you have to ensure that those restrictions are in place.
That's right.
Otherwise, they'll be at the highest.
That's right. And this came out naturally from how we had the rest of the data set up already, because we already had the implementing partners. Again, as if you would virtualize DHIS2, the partners they're looking at all the metadata, but they're just seeing the data for themselves, their own partner. All the agency users are seeing all the metadata, but they're only seeing the data for their own agency. Yeah. Okay. And we already had the interagency users who in the country team, they're responsible for seeing the data across all the funding mechanisms, all the partners, all the agencies. So in fact, we already had the user accounts set up according to this hierarchy, and this involved no extra setup except for choosing a category option group set for each approval level. It's rather strange. And I've often wondered whether we should have just done a more generic thing called workflow. I even took a while to look at a few of the workflow engines that are out there, and we've had more than one suggestion that we just adopt some workflow engine and bring it into DHIS2 and use that. So far, this fits exactly the needs that PEPFAR has. and we haven't had a lot of requests from other places for an extended approval system. So it's lean and mean, and it works, and it's easy to configure. And if you know what you now know, you can actually know how to configure it. Any other questions? I'll accept a lot of the blame for this wonky design, but it works.
I have one question.
Yes.
From much earlier in the presentation.
Sure.
The PEPFAR, the more MRH use case. If you do the two-step approve, accept and approve,
Yes.
let's say I'm at the district level, do I accept all facilities in one go, or can I unaccept one facility?
Yes. You accept each one individually, and how it's
Then
written.
below, okay.
How it's written in the database. This is earlier, isn't it? Is that when you approve something at a lower level, it writes one record in the database saying this data is approved at this facility. And when you accept that approval, it modifies that record at that facility and adds a Boolean saying accepted equals true.
By a different user.
Yes, by a higher level user. Right. So
It's hard to draw in diagram.
you can't accept your own approval. It must be done from someone who has authority at the next higher level. Absolutely. And so that way you have four out of your 5 facilities in your district have reported their data. You can accept them all and lock them. And you know that now you only need to think about that 5th one. When their data is ready, you can review that. And once you accept that, then everything's been accepted. You can review. And if one of your facilities needs to make a fix, you can just unaccept that one facility. You don't have to worry about the other ones changing. We've had some requests for even finer grain. If one facility has one data element reported wrongly, we've had requests, can you just unlock that one data element? We don't want to go back and look at all the other data elements, right? And so far we've kind of resisted the putting in all the instrumentation to go to that level of granularity. All right. Any other questions about data approvals? Yes.
Do you know
Scott?
another use case other than PEPFAR?
That wanted that granularity?
No.
Oh, that uses. So, Yola might speak to that.
No, I'm sure you know.
No, you probably know better than I, actually.
The initial requirements came much earlier than PEPFAR. I think India was one of the first MOH implementations that went to approvals. I'm not aware of many that actually use it now, but I know, for example, Cameroon does.
So PEPFAR was not the first, but it was the one that pushed us over the edge to actually do it.
So for PEPFAR, you developed a specific customer to deal with a lot of user interaction, right? So I was going to ask, how does it look for the MOH? What kind of notifications do you have in place, etc.? How do you deal with the UI?
The approvals user interface is part of the reporting app, and it's in big need of updating, particularly since it still asks you to select a data set, back from before we had the concept of workflow to combine data sets into the same approval regimen. And there's been a number of discussions back and forth about how to rewrite it, and one idea that both Lars and I really support is, how can we make the app that brings the information to you? If I'm a data approver, tell me, is there something I need to approve or not? Do I have work to do, or do I have no work to do? If I am a higher level data approval and I wonder, why don't I have anything to approve yet? Who hasn't gotten their approvals in yet? Let me find some easy way to ask that question of the system and have it tell me, well, districts A, B, C, and D are in. District E, you're still waiting for them to hear from.
And I think also in terms of giving feedback to the lower levels, that they get a notification when their data has been approved.
Yeah, one thing that I'd love to see, going beyond notifications. Notifications is a great first step, but I'd love to see DHIS2 implement more like a to-do list. Like, this is work I have on my plate. It's time for me to enter my data because the period has closed and the data is not complete yet, or it's time for me to do a data approval because the data is in and it's marked complete, but it's not yet been approved. And the main difference between the to-do list and the notifications is with the to-do list, the item has a sense often built into the DHIS2 when the item is satisfied. It's satisfied when the data is entered or marked complete or approved, or when some data validation cases have been resolved and the data now passes validation. And maybe it's I who need to do that, or maybe it's my colleague who has the same authorities that I do, who can also approve it or enter the data or resolve the validation cases, or maybe it's someone at a higher level who reaches down and does that for me. But I would love to see DHIS2 go more in the direction of a to-do list. When something is on my list, or if it's been done, it's not on my list, whether I did it or someone else did it. Anyway, that's my own...
The three of us are smiling because we have a lot of discussions around tasks in the
Yeah.
You should look for the epic for tasks. And,
Absolutely, I will. And that's one of the reasons why in the back-end team, when we had these scheduled jobs, I kept saying, call it job, not task. We want to reserve the word task for user things.
Yeah.
Okay, so unless there are any other questions, that may end the presentation. Thank you for being here in person or streaming or seeing the recorded version of this. Is there anyone in the room that I owe lunch for tomorrow? Or did everyone learn at least one thing new about physics? Good. I thought I might get off free with this offer. I wasn't sure. All right. Thank you so much.